Hello, Garland here. And now that the clown show is, I guess, over in Lithuania, we'll talk about NATO, about what it has become post and what it will be post Ukraine. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. And so I thought I'd talk about, I don't know if this is going to be philosophical or what, but I just thought I'd talk about NATO a little bit, what it is. And I think it's, in light of some things that are going on now, it's important to have this discussion. What is NATO for this reason? Of course, I don't have to tell you guys. The people in here are people that are knowledgeable of history, that are knowledgeable about, the subjects that the whole NATO, Ukraine, and EU, European stuff. You guys are very, very knowledgeable of that. The question is, I think we know what NATO was supposed to be. We know what it was revealed to be. What was it revealed? I think the biggest revelation was the first really big revelation was when the EU started to suffer economically because of US foreign policy, because it was obvious that or maybe even earlier, when it was obvious that the ruling elite class of Europe was going to go along with foreign policies that was not in the best interest of their constituents. And then the second big eye opener, and maybe the biggest one, was, of course, the US attack on Germany, blowing up Nord Stream. And people at that point, and there was something, let me just say this, there was something in that. There was something involved in that whole Nord Stream attack that was also quite telling. And I've brought this up many times. Not a lot of people talk about it, but I talk about it. And that is that when the U.S., if we are to believe, those of us who do, I believe Cy Hirsch, if we were to believe Cy Hirsch's story, then what the U.S. did, and its, assistants, henchmen and women, whatever the case may be, did, was they actually had a military exercise in which NATO was simulating defending itself from an outside attack that being Russia. And they actually, and here's the great irony, they use that as cover to attack Germany. There's the great irony. To me, that tells you more than anything. When they use the foundational, their raison d'etre, however it's pronounced, right? Their reason for being, their reason for existence, they use that. What is that? I'm always thinking, it looks like a bug, a mosquito. Okay. At any rate, and they use that as cover to do the opposite, to attack one of their people who were, a member of their bloc, right? That was telling that the whole thing was a fraud from that point. At that point, it just says they didn't mean any of it. Whether they did in the past, who knows? Now it's obvious that they don't. This is not about a military alliance to protect the European countries from an invader. It is about another method for the U.S. to execute its foreign policy. Whoever has to suffer has to suffer. It's a way for them to go after Russia. It always was. When the Germans lost to Russia, the U.S. empire has been plotting on how they could confront Russia ever since. So if we're honest about what it is now that the neocons have gotten control of foreign policy, NATO is a neocon tool. NATO is it's an organization, as I've said many times, an umbrella organization to bring all of the countries in Europe together so that the U.S. could use them at its, will, however it chose, right? But okay, so that kind of tells you what it is from the perspective of the makeup of it. You know what I mean? It's not a group of equals. It's not a group of countries that have come together to address a common threat or at least a common fear or a common adversary. It's none of those things. It is now an organization which a powerful entity, the US, can bring less powerful entities together to easier control them. And then the question becomes obvious, control them to do what? Right. And keep in mind what I'm saying. What if I sum up what I was saying before? It was this. When I just said just before I said we get into what is it trying to accomplish? What I was getting at was this. Let me put it to you like this. If you think about the University of Maryland, I live in Maryland. 50 years ago, it was there. A lot of the buildings were there, but there's new buildings. The teachers were all different. The students were all different. The curriculum was different for the most part. Most of the curriculum was different, but we still called it the University of Maryland. 50 years later, all different students, methods of teaching, all these different things, and we still call it the University of Maryland. But just the buildings and the grass, or some of them are the same, some of them are new. But all the other stuff, the people, curriculum, everything's changed. We call it the University of Maryland still. Why? Because it is a process. It's a pattern. It's an ongoing changing pattern. And we call that process, that pattern, the University of Maryland. That's NATO. NATO is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing thing. It's not one thing. It's not that in 1945 or 6 or whatever it was made, and now it's exactly like it was. All those people are dead, long gone. The ideology exists that was behind it. But it's still here in name, but it is morphed into, as it obviously would, something different than it was. Not saying that it didn't have the same plan, but something different than it was now. So let's say this. And if you think about it, when it started, the countries, that Marshall Plan was going on. The U.S. was rebuilding Western Europe, providing a lot of money for Western Europe, putting in bases all over Western Europe. It was vassalizing and occupying Western Europe. NATO was a tool in furtherance of the vassalizing and occupying of Western Europe, to keep them under control, to make sure there was that each one of those countries couldn't be allowed to have its own foreign policy, its own military policy. So you had to bring them all together in one organization, and the U.S. had to be in control, fully control of that organization. So realistically, each of the countries in Europe are not independent and sovereign militarily. They're not the NATO is not there to defend them. It's there to keep them in vassalage. It's there to keep them under control. So they can say, you're a member of NATO. You can only do what we all agree with in NATO. And we all agree that the United States makes the rules. So that's all NATO was. But it is an evolving process too. And so now the neocons have it, and you see what it is. Now, a couple of things about also, and when we talk about the evolution of NATO to where it is now. There was a time when NATO was very powerful militarily, when NATO had a lot of troops, tens of thousands of tanks and troops all along, and they were sitting on one side of the border and the Russians were on the other side, and they were faced off at all times. Everybody's waiting for the other person to jump, right? And they were powerfully militarily powerful, and if they went toe-to-toe with the Red Army, I don't know what would happen, but it would have probably ended up in nuclear. But the actual ground war would have been, unbelievable, because both sides were heavily armed. Well, NATO having gone in the direction of as a economic bloc, having gone in the direction of neoliberalism, they kind of disarmed themselves by privatizing everything. Neoliberalism privatizes everything, so they privatized everything to do with their military and military-industrial complex. And by privatizing everything, they ensured that tremendous profits would be made. But they also ensured that would be the focus of the military hardware, was tremendous profits and not military hardware. So inevitably, what you get is extremely expensive military hardware. That's what you ultimately got. And they have to put a lot of bells and whistles and make it appear as though it can do lots of complicated technological things, so they can ask the kind of price that they're asking. It's not whether or not it works. A lot of times it's just a missile. You could fire it from point A to point B and it hits it. But what they prefer to do is add all this extra stuff to it so they can charge millions or hundreds of thousands per missile. So that's what you ended up with NATO. You ended up with a money laundering operation where now the U.S. empire is saying everybody's got to spend 2% of their GDP on buying weapons, mostly from them. So that's what you end up with. You end up with a money laundering operation, a neocon money laundering greed operation, but it doesn't have the military prowess it needs to back it up. So now, they're squared off with Russia, squared off But NATO doesn't have anything to square off with. Their militaries have just rotted of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism has just rotted them away in financialism, where even the companies that make things, they only make things so that they can find an excuse to buy, to raise the value of their stock, or they can take their money where they make a profit and buy their own stock. So they're not, you have now have a neoliberal organization, NATO, that is about controlling their vassals, that produces very expensive, very poorly made military equipment, and it's still acting as though it's a military power, but it's not. That's why when this all started in December of 2021, when the Russians sent a document to the US and said, look, we need to talk about this, or this thing could go military, the US said that's not even a starting point. The US didn't have any idea what it was in for militarily. They've been fighting these little countries in the Middle East or Africa, or they couldn't defend themselves, and they went against a peer, at minimum, competitor, and they weren't prepared. The Russians started off punching lightly, but once the Russians got a little bit heavier with the fist, they really just militarily and industrially, they're outperforming NATO in that they still have a lot of industry and they can make war material that the West just can't do. And it's a real army. It's their army. So their people are trained and their people are prepared. The West has put together just any kind of patchwork proxy army with any kind of patchwork gear. And it's they're winning. They always win the information war, and they've got NAFO fellows on Twitter, and all of those things are good and fine. But in the real world, they weren't industrially, militarily prepared for this kind of a battle. And the Russians were. And now what we have is NATO, an organization that sees itself as a world power, being reduced to not even a regional power. I mean, here's what I'll say. If in order to be a regional power even, you have to be able to project military power around the region in a dominant fashion. To be a world power, you got to be able to protect military power around the world, but it has to be in a dominant fashion. You can't just say we can fight anywhere in the world. We'll win a few and we'll lose a few. You got to be able to say we can fight anywhere in the world, and wherever we fight, we'll dominate. Well, there's no place in the major parts. The United States cannot fight and dominate in Europe or Asia. They can't. They can fight, yes. Can they dominate? No. And the fact of the matter is, right now, based on what we know from various war games, the U.S. would likely fight and lose either place. U.S. right now, they don't have, particularly in this stage of the Ukrainian military conflict, where they're so short of ammunition, that even if they could fight and hold up, they couldn't do it but a couple weeks because they'd run out of ammo. They wouldn't be able to continue. So the U.S. is not much more than a nuclear power. And if you're a nuclear power, the only thing you're saying is, if we get in a fight, if we get in a war, we can commit suicide. And we're a suicide bomber. If we get in a war, we can't defend ourselves. We can't assertively defeat you. The only thing we can do is use a weapon that'll ensure that we die too. That's all we got. So we can commit suicide. That's where the U.S. military and NATO's military is now. The ability to commit suicide. I don't see that as a way to project military power. Now, something else is important, very important, is going on with NATO, and that is this. That's this. NATO has moved to the Middle East, and they have attacked Afghanistan, and they have attacked Libya, and they have really, acted together against Syria, to be quite frank, and Iran as a bloc. Maybe informally when it comes to going against Iran and Syria, informally somewhat, but overall they've acted kind of as a bloc in the Middle East. So NATO is both European and in the Middle East. Now here's the thing, they have the military power to project into the Middle East. At least they had. Iran's growing so much they don't have what they used to have. But they can project, they have been able to project military power into the Middle East. Now they see another great power has arisen, not is rising, has arisen in the East. And so now they're like, okay, we got to be able to project power in Europe. So we're going to build and we're going to put 300,000 troops on Russia, right? We got to maintain everything we got in Africa. We got to maintain everything we got in the Middle East because Iran's there. So we got to be able to project power there and in Africa because China is of concern. Now, meanwhile, excuse me, sorry about that. we also have to build up everything, dominant missiles and bases and unstoppable building in the East to quote counter China. What it really means is to try to maintain military domination in the Pacific region, because we can't economically dominate the Pacific region. We can't diplomatically do it. So we'd like to try to do it militarily, and we'll use force to control everything. So where the U.S. empire is right now is our economy is not doing well, but we must dramatically spend a lot of money along Russia's border to build our forces up there, to build up NATO along Russia's forces, Russia's border in the Arctic. We got to spend all kind of money there, and we got to spend an unthinkable amount of money to build up in the East to go up against China, to be ready to dominate China. And meanwhile, we got to maintain everything in the Middle East. We got to maintain Southcom in South America, Latin America, and AFRICOM. Things are getting kind of expensive for a country that doesn't have much money. So one of the ways that we have to do it is by eating Europe alive. We needed a new customer. And when it comes to energy, we did it simple. NATO cut Europe's energy off that was expensive, that was cheap, and sell them expensive energy. And that's a way for the U.S. to get more. They need more, but they just need more money to do all this building and all this other stuff they have to do and expand the empire militarily worldwide. One of the ways they're doing it is by extracting wealth from Europe, from the EU. So now, if you look, and Europe is even complaining to get, so what NATO now is, it's a coercive, economically extractive organization, because it's one thing. I mean, Europe was doing good, the US was doing good, everybody was making money. I don't agree with what they were. They were stealing money from Africa, Middle East, South America, you name it. But bottom line was they're all living high on the hog and they're screwing over everybody else. It's not as easy to screw over everybody else now. So the US is doing that to Europe. And it's using NATO to do it. Isn't that it's an excuse? We've got to do it because of Russia, and NATO must stay united. So they're just extracting money. From the EU. So NATO is also an economic extraction tool. You use it. Think about it. They went to Afghanistan or Libya or these other places that have oil to extract money for the oil, to control the oil markets, etc. And now they're doing it to Europe. NATO it's good for ensuring that Europeans don't have autonomy, military autonomy. It's a good economic extraction tool. And now that it's going to the Middle East, right? It's that what they're trying to build is a worldwide NATO. And I've even heard that term used. We need a worldwide NATO and a worldwide. Think about that. You have to rename it? It's called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, to be quite frank, for it to expand into the East to confront China. Don't you have to rename it? Can you still call it the North Atlantic and have a worldwide, think about, they're saying a worldwide NATO, a worldwide North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So now what you're saying is NATO goes to the Middle East. When the U.S. says this country's right or wrong or good or bad or should be invaded, NATO invades them in the Middle East. Now the U.S. says China's a problem. NATO now goes to China. The U.S. looks over at China. Hey, look over there. It's China. China's bad. We got to do something about it. And NATO goes wherever the U.S. points, like a dog, right? Is it really an organization to protect Europe? If the U.S. says to NATO, look, that part of the world over there is a problem. And when the next NATO meeting, all these idiots come out and say, yeah, China's a problem. China's a problem. We all agree. If the U.S. woke up tomorrow and said, Iceland's a problem, the next NATO meeting, every one of those vassals would say, Iceland's a problem. Why? Not because Iceland's a problem to them or China's a problem to them. In fact, what's a problem to them would be decoupling from China. But when they're told to say China's a problem, they do what they're told. They do what they say. So now NATO is a worldwide, I mean, this is clear now. For NATO to expand to clearly and obviously to expand for military confrontation against the country that the United States coincidentally happens to say is their biggest competitor and that they fear a confrontation with. And then we're building in that area. What's NATO going to do? NATO is going to do the same. It's going to send ships. It's going to do everything. It's going to be involved to let them know NATO's involved, and NATO's, which, let me add this, which the message to the Russians and Chinese is clear. If we get in any conflict with the United States, we got to fight it together. The U.S. is basically saying, if we get in a fight with Russia or China, we're going to include all of the EU. So doesn't Russia and China say, well, if your entire coalition is going to fight us, our coalition has to fight you? So don't they, Russia and China have to say, based on what NATO is trying to achieve now, which is world domination, if we either we're in a fight with NATO or we're not. We're not in a fight with the US. We're not in a fight with Europe. Either we're in a fight with NATO, which means NATO is coming after both of us. Because if we fight one, we fight them both. So, or we're not. If we're not in a fight, we're not in a fight. But if you're going to say, if you pick on me, you got my buddy, then I got to say, if you pick on me, you got my buddy too, to even things out. Maybe that'll deter you from this thing. And I think that's where Russia is. I reported on an article today where the Russian and the Chinese newspapers were talking about the strategic alliance of Russia and China is greater than a military alliance. Now, that implies something, doesn't it? If I say this is greater than a military alliance, then what I'm saying is, to some extent, yeah, a military alliance is kind of almost axiomatic here, almost obvious, self-evident when I say we've got an alliance, and that's what the Chinese said. It's greater than a military alliance. That implies that a military alliance is there, but it's far more than just, see, it doesn't sound like this. That's far more than just a military alliance. Is that a military alliance? Just a military alliance. That's nothing. What we have is far more than just a meager, paltry military alliance. And I agree, because they're working diplomatically around the world. They're working economically to replace the dollar. They're doing lots of things. So they're right. It's far more. It's an economic alliance. It is a cultural alliance. It is a push that, to be quite frank, they're not thrilled with wokeness and stuff. It is a, so it is an alliance that is, I would agree, Russia and China, it's far more than a military alliance. And let me add this. So they recognize, as the U.S. says, well, let me do this. In fact, I think I saw something where I saw something, maybe it's not here. Oh, Moscow reacts to NATO summit, right? So the foreign minister said, the collective West, this is, so let me read Russia's reaction, Foreign Ministry of Russia. The collective West, led by the U.S., is not willing to accept the formation of a multipolar world and intends to defend its hegemony by all available means, including military ones. What the West calls the rules-based order is nothing but a license they granted themselves to violate international law and has nothing to do with the UN, which NATO frequently invokes. NATO's achievements are well known: the growing instability, destruction of countries, rampant terrorism, war crimes that are committed with impunity, the blood of civilians, including children, and the endless flow of refugees, the Russian Foreign Ministry said. The bloc is now determined to NATOize Ukraine, treating the country as an expendable resource in a hybrid war against Russia, supplying Kiev with long-range weapons in order to prolong the conflict for as long as possible, the foreign ministry added. Meanwhile, the U.S. military-industrial complex is happily rubbing its hands at the prospect of selling its European allies replacements for weapons destroyed in Ukraine. So, I mean, they got to say a lot more. Washington and its allies are trying to impose their own rules and drain resources along their proven neocolonial patterns. They said Russia will respond to threats in a timely and appropriate manner using all means and methods at our disposal. So Russia makes it clear how they feel about NATO. And to be quite frank, I don't see anything there that I really disagree with. NATO is a poisonous machine, an evil and poisonous war machine, nothing more. So it is the ugly fangs of neoliberalism now, and the ugly, brutal tool of neoliberalism. That's what NATO has become, and is neocon organization bent on world hegemony. It now says they're now saying we have to expand to Asia to act on behalf of U.S. foreign policy. And now there's pushback. There are now some parts of NATO in Europe saying, no, we're not down with that. It would be economic suicide for us. Macron said no, but Macron can't be counted on. None of the ruling elite class in Europe can be counted on to stand up when it comes down to it. They can be counted on to fold like a cheap folding chair when the U.S. presses them too hard. So the thing I do think is this: whatever Europe is now, I mean, NATO is now, I don't think it'll be the same thing a year from now, because I don't believe that NATO can continue to fight the war. There is let me see. There is, if I can get in, there's a picture going on around. And it is, if I can find it, uh, this is it. And so let's go. Somebody's really made a pretty funny meme out of it, but we're gonna look at that picture, and I think a picture says 1,000 words. Okay, so here, what do we got? We got our boy Zelensky. Now, this was an actual picture, except for, of course, when they gave him the mop bucket, right? But this is the guy. This is not. This is him in the actual picture. This is not, photoshopped in, right? And so what somebody did was they added a mop and a mop bucket. How appropriate is that, right? But this is an actual picture. And I'm looking at that picture, and haven't been around members of the ruling elite class before. Haven't been around these suckers, not at that level, but at a very high level. People who were at these organizations for crazy rich people, right? Been there. And this is, notice the look. See this woman, see those two, that's like the classic look for two wives of the rich and famous. The whole outfit, the whole fake and phony smile. Oh dear, it's so wonderful to see you again. Yes, it's wonderful to see you again. What is your husband doing? Oh, out making sure lots of peasants die. How about yours? We're making sure the peasants die too. Have a wonderful day. Oh, and a beautiful brooch you have on. Why, thank you. I'll see you in Aspen soon. That's what we're looking at here, right? See these people, they're all in. And now you notice this. Look at the way they're dressed. They look at the way their hair. This is the ruling elite class here, right? Look at all of them. Look at Macron standing there. He's got a banker's look on his face, right? They're grinning and they're happy, right? Look at this dude. He ain't even in the picture. Somebody made it right. Look at his outfit he has. You know what I mean? It's pathetic. Let me see if I can find some more. Let's see if this is this is the actual picture. Let me show you the actual picture. Here we go. So this is the actual picture of him. And see, the thing is, he don't get it. Look at the way he's dressed. And I don't think it's an accident. He probably didn't even choose those clothes. Somebody, whoever his masters are in here, they told him what to wear. They want to bring him in here, and look at this. It is obvious to anybody watching this. It's like this. Okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to look at that picture and tell me who the poor guy is. Tell me who doesn't fit in, right? Tell me who doesn't fit in. Look at the clothes. Look at the haircuts. Right? Everything. And look at this guy. And look at the look on his face. He's biting his bottom lip. What does that say to you? He has this look that says, man, I don't know what to make of this. They told me to come here. I did that. They told me to beg for money. And well, okay, I didn't beg the way they told me to beg. I actually was very demanding. And I told them, you better give me money. What's wrong with you? And we're losing because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You selfish sons of bitches. I hate every one of you, right? They told me to say that, and I said that. And what has happened here is, if you look at this guy, he has insulted them. He came in and he spoke. He thought he had some horsepower. He thought he was somebody. And he raked everybody over the coals for not giving him enough stuff. And if you look at it, this thing's over, right? Look at it. Look at this. Look at this. You tell me how things are going in Ukraine right now. You tell me how where that support is. You tell me how they are concerned about this guy and his well-being. They're probably avoiding him because he's a dead man. The decision might have already been made. Sometimes people in the mafia are afraid when all of their friends stop hanging around them. They're like, "Hey, Joe, let's go get a drink." Nah, I'm good. Tom? Oh, man, I got to go home and change the oil in my lawnmower. Okay, how about you? Bill, how about you go get a drink? Yeah, oh, man, I think I hear my wife calling me. Got to run, check on the kids. You don't have any kids. No time like the present to start. See ya. He's gone, right? Why? Nobody wants to hang around you. It's like you got a sign around your neck that says dead man. It's like you got a hat on, DM. I'm a dead man. And everybody else in the mafia knows, hey, have you heard about Garland? Yeah, what? He's a dead man. Thanks for telling me. I ain't hanging around him. I don't hang around dead men. That crap can be contagious and leak off on me. No thanks. Walking Dead. When I look at that picture of this guy, let me show you a picture of The Walking Dead. And it's not a zombie movie. No, this is not The Walking Dead. I used to watch it when it first came out. I loved it. There you go, right there. See that look on his face? It means, oh, man, I am screwed now. He's biting his bottom lip. Are they going to kill me now or kill me later? And when you see the grins on their faces, think about this. Look at these grins on their faces. Look at this. This is his wife, I think, right? Here's the thing. There's like hundreds of thousands of young Ukrainians being hurled to their deaths in the minefield of Donbass. And look at the look on her face. Do you think for 1 second that she gives a shit about any of them? Do you think she can? Look at that look on her face. Do any of these people, like these Ukrainians, are in minefields? They're nonstop. They're being shelled all day. They're being attacked by machine gun. What the heck is going on here? That's what I want to know. So that looks awful damn suspicious. I don't know. It looks like some smooching or something going on there. Look like, get a room, you degenerates. But whatever the case may be, look at this guy. They're all looking at him. He's condemned, just like he went before a judge. When you see this, it's over. It's over. Oh, there's NATO unity, all right. When they all got together when he wasn't in the room. I guarantee you, at some point, see this guy? At some point, they had a meeting. And they said, okay, let's have a meeting on what to do with what to have for lunch tomorrow. Let's have a meeting. Zelensky, yeah, leave the room. And he's probably, oh, but I got to be here. Because then they're like two big guys grabbed him up under the shoulders and his feet came off the ground and out the room and slammed the door. And they were like, okay, hang. We'll take a vote. Hang, stab, Novichok, which I like Novichok. Or we'll just say he was killed in a Russian military, a missile attack or something, right? And they're like raising their hands. They're, taking, they're taking, each of them. They're, giving their opinion about why they should, how they should kill him, when they should kill him. Hey, he really got pissed me off the other day. Why don't we just beat him to death? I'd like to get a couple kicks on that little short green suit wearing son of a bitch. So that's the kind of stuff they're saying. He's in a room, the door's closed, and they're plotting how they're going to kill him. I may be wrong, but it seems to me, knowing those low-life sociopaths and the fact that that picture don't look like it's going to, that picture does not look like things are going to work out in favor of the guy in the green janitor suit. That's all I'm going to say. You got on a green janitor suit. Everybody else has on a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 suit. You got on something that I could go down to a camping supply store and buy. You got camping supply. That outfit that he has, I wouldn't wear. You couldn't get me in that. Look at this, first of all. And I mean, I'm not saying that Garland Nixon is a fashionista by any stretch of the imagination. I like to dress, at least look like I got some sense. I know how to match my clothes, black and gray or something, whatever the hell, right? Blue and brown, those things match. But I'm saying, see that suit? He getting me in that suit. It's kind of, I don't know. I guess if you wear that suit, don't you have to have one of those hats like Fidel Castro? That looks like the outfit that Fidel Castro wore for like 70 years. right? Look at that. And might I add, if they're going to issue him some fatigues, which apparently is what happened, they could at least have hemmed him up a little bit. From the looks of things, they issued this guy some basic fatigues, and they're like, "How long are you? How long? What's your inseam? Oh, it's about 31. Oh, we got 36. Okay, can you take it up? No, shut up. Here, put these on. Issued 30 now. What kind of brogans do you want? You want desert gray or black? Well, I'd like, but shut up. You're getting desert gray. Look at that. He has his clothing. He didn't buy that at Banana Republic. It was issued. It was issued. The U.S. government issued the fatigues and the brogans that he has on. You went to a meeting of the ruling elite in fatigues and brogans, dude. And then you stood up in front of them and chastised them for not giving you enough weapons. You're dead man. Dead man walking. They ain't going to look at some guy who they feel like should be serving drinks and shining their shoes. And you do look like you should be shining their shoes. I would say either you look like you should have a mop in your hand or you are a shoe shine boy. That's what we got to call Zelensky from now on. Vladimir Zelensky, instead of president of Ukraine, shoe shine boy. Or what did they call him back in the day? Boot black, he was a boot black or a shoe shine boy, whatever hell you want to call him. That's all he looks like to me, a shoe shine boy. And they're just ignoring the shoe shine boy. I'm surprised somebody doesn't walk over, like they get finished their drink and look at him and hand him the empty glass for him to do something with. Oh, excuse me, Zelensky, come over here. Yeah. My wife would like an extra dry martini, and I'll have an Arnold Palmer. I don't really drink, and no ice, please. Thanks. I'm surprised they don't come in and give him their order. He looks like he's waiting for their order. He looks like he would go to the bar and get it if they ask him. He might as well. But no, he had the nerve to chastise the hand that feeds him in a janitor suit, in a pair of brogans, and some issued fatigues. Oh, I imagine they're pissed at him. And so now they'll probably just say, what do we do? Do we just let the Ukrainians keep dying? Sure, that's easy enough. But this guy's getting to be a pain. Or they might just tell him, shut up. You're running your stinking mouth a little bit too loud. You've gotten too big for your issued britches. And if you keep running your mouth like that, we're going to find somebody else to fit those brogans, brother. That's all I'm saying. We'll be looking at the bottom of those brogans because you're going to be laying on the pavement. So you figure it out. That's what's going on with him. He's done. He is done. I still can't believe that he went to a function like that dressed like a grunt. That's what he's dressed like. He's dressed like a slick sleeve, as they call him, fresh out of boot camp, green as grass. That's what they got on. You know, if you saw, you ever see some of these, generals that run a country, it's like General so-and-so who runs the country, he's a dictator, but he usually has on a general's jacket with medals all over it and one of those hats with all of the embroidery and stuff. He looks like a general. This guy, what's he look like? He looks like the help. And unfortunately, he ran his yap. So now NATO's shall we say, they must dispense with him in one way or the other. I look for him to be swallowing some Novichok soon. But so again, NATO is, and I say all that to go here with it. After this debacle, which we're getting towards the bottom end of it. I mean, it's obvious that Ukraine can't win. It's obvious that Ukraine is going to lose. It's obvious that NATO doesn't have a lot of options, that they lost the economic war, that they lost a diplomatic war. It's obvious that this has not worked out well for NATO, and economically it has destroyed Europe, and Europe is being deindustrialized completely. It's turning inside out, and that Europe within the next 5 years is going to move to a whole different political structure. The ruling elite class is going to obviously change. So all of that is important to understand as to what NATO is. As NATO right now, I'll put it to you like this. NATO is moving inevitably to its next phase of existence, whatever that may be, because NATO, okay, there's NATO, hey, we're going to protect ourselves from Russia because they knew Russia wasn't a threat. Russia was broke. Russia was trying to come back, right? Now Russia's got some powerful power. So NATO says, oh, Russia's gotten too big for their britches. So now we got to show that we can slap them back down using Ukraine. So that was their plan. We got to slap Russia back down using Ukraine. Now they've got to face the reality that it didn't work, that Russia was too powerful, that they can't, that Russia is now, that they waited too long. And since Russia had nukes, it was always too long. But that's another story. But to be able to militarily and economically harm Russia, Russia built itself up good and strong. It built up some economic armor. It built up some military armor, and it was ready for a fight. And it was ready. I think the Russians must have felt that at some point NATO was going to get froggy, as they say. And NATO's been building towards this, encircling Russia with bases, all these things, and building up the biggest proxy army. This proxy army is going to weaken Russia. And so they had a plan. But what happens when this plan fails? Here's the next thing. NATO is not going to be what it was before they tried to execute the plan, because you're going for it. You're saying, we're going to take out Russia. Well, if you don't do that, then you can't, how are you going to argue to the countries from NATO will defend you from Russia when your only battle with Russia you lost? NATO is here to defend you from Russia, but unfortunately for us, we can't defend you from Russia. And keep in mind something. This war was never about Ukraine anyway. Of course, obviously, it's about Russia and China, right? So the U.S. is showing everybody that they can go up against China and dominate Russia, and take Russia out. It was never really about Ukraine. It was about humbling Russia. And by humbling Russia, they reiterate to the world how powerful NATO is. But if they don't humble Russia and they lose, then at that point, you've lost it all, because you're no longer the world's hegemon. To lose this is to lose everything. And the neocon project is lost, because the neocon project is about the Wolfowitz doctrine, right? It's about world domination and not allowing anyone else to get powerful enough to compete with you in any region of the world. But if they lose this, which it's already lost, then it's clear that the Russians can compete with you in that part of the world, that there is now a part of the world that you are not militarily dominant. And whatever power you have in that part of the world is weakening. That's why they have to, even though NATO's getting weak, NATO should be doing right now. What would they be doing if they were smart? Would they be expanding into the Arctic, expanding into Finland? No, they would be retooling at a basic level. If NATO was smart right now, they'd say, you know what, we've grown weak. We don't have what we need. Let's just start from scratch. How many troops do we need? How many this, how many that do we need? Let's start a plan. We're going to build up. It's going to take us 10 years, but we're going to build up the military potential again. That's what NATO would do. But no, NATO is still saying Russia doesn't want us in Sweden, so we got to be in Sweden. Russia doesn't want us in Finland. We got to be in Finland. We got to be in the Arctic. We got to be. Now, you can't even fight them on the Russian Eastern European border, and you're trying to move to the Arctic? Russia doesn't have to worry about you on the Eastern European border. You don't have the troops. You don't have the military hardware. So you're expanding to Sweden. You're expanding to Finland. You want to expand to the Arctic when you can't even protect what you have now. And you can't protect it because NATO's not here to protect it. Then think about this. If they were really concerned about Russia, they'd say, we got a problem. We don't have troops. We don't have hardly anything along the Russian border. And since the Russians are violent and vicious, they're going to attack on the Russian border, and they're going to keep rolling, and we can't stop them. What are we going to do? No, they're not worried about Russia attacking on along the Baltics or something like that, or Poland. Why is that? Because they know Russia has no designs of doing it. They can actually extend themselves to Finland and Sweden and all over the place. They're extending themselves to Asia, all that. Why? Because they know Russia ain't going to attack them. So they don't have to build up their forces in Eastern Europe, because they know good and damn well that Russia's not attacking them in Eastern Europe. The fact that they're doing nothing to reinforce their forces of any consequence in Eastern Europe, but saying that one day they're going to have 300,000 people there. Meanwhile, the countries there are out of stuff because it's all going to Ukraine getting blown up. It just shows they're not really afraid that it's all a fraud. They're not afraid. But when they lose this, and practically lost, then there's some splaining time to do, because you've got people who are going to say, what did we suffer all this for, and give all of this, and you told us we had to go through all of this pain and economic pain and BD and us, blah, 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 so Russia wouldn't win. and Russia won. You told us you could stop Russia from winning. You couldn't stop Russia from winning. There's nothing you could do. And now, after all the pain that we've had, and we continue to take, and we're looking forward in the future based on this thing, you're now just going to sit down and make a deal with Russia because you don't have any other options. We ain't going to fight Russia. We wanted you to make a deal with Russia way back, but you wouldn't. And so NATO is really, and this is the key, they're going to lose the support of the people. You're not going to have a bunch of people in Germany and France and England saying, hooray, I'm so happy we're in NATO, let's strengthen NATO. You're going to have a lot of people, everyday people, working class people in those countries questioning why they're still in NATO. How is NATO benefiting us? What's in it for us? They want to drag us into another war. And we're not in the decision-making levels of NATO. Nobody is but the people in Washington, D.C., the neocons, the ones who really don't care about us. There's going to be a rebound where you're going to have new governments come in, and they're going to come in based on their assertions that they were going to de-risk from NATO. Bet you're going to see that for sure. So NATO is going to change. I think it's going to get weaker. I think it may lose some countries, but it's going to get weaker. See, they've got France and Germany, et cetera, kind of over a barrel, ironically, because they cut Russia off. They cut them off from cheap fuel. So to get anything, they got to get it from the U.S. And they've all authored the sanctions, so they can't violate the sanctions and go back and start buying it from Russia. So now the U.S., they have to do the U.S.'s bidding because, ironically, the U.S. said you can't buy gas and oil from the Russians. You got to buy it from us because the Russians will use it as a weapon. And you know what they know just as well as they know their names on their faces? That the United States will cut them off. That the United States was never meant that Russia will use it as a weapon. They meant that we'll use it as a weapon. That we want to get you to have to buy all your energy from us. And if you don't do what we tell you, we'll cut your energy off because we'll damn sure use it as a weapon. Everybody knows that. So you're going to see Europe the Europe that's in NATO will be more under vassalage than ever because that's the only way they can stay in NATO. It's going to get more and more and more. It's getting more and more totalitarian. You're going to see some serious splits from some of the countries because they're going to get so much pressure from the people, and you're going to see countries where the government changes due to a number of things, including an upcoming economic crash. So post what NATO was before this conflict started, what it has become at this Vilnius summit, which is, just lost. They're confused. They don't know what to do, which way to go. They're reduced to just holding on to a narrative that doesn't even resemble reality. What it is now, that thing, and what it intends to be, which is a worldwide NATO that challenges China and maintains the rules-based order everywhere in the world. It's just a military domination of the world. That's what they want NATO to be. But as a result of this mother of all debacles that's going to go down in Ukraine, after the debacle in Afghanistan, then you're going to see some real wrinkles in NATO. And there's going to be another discussion, and the discussion is going to be, how do we get a security deal in Europe? It's going to go from, okay, we got to make Russia a deal that they'll never take, and they're going to make deals, give Russia offers that they'll never take, and Russia's going to say no. But at some point, a rumbling will start in Europe that will say, we want to talk to Russia about a realistic deal. A realistic deal. We want to talk to Russia about a realistic deal wherein we take into account their security needs. And of course, you know what Russia's going to say. You have to back to pre-1991. You got to back off of our border to pre-1991 status. That's what Russia's going to say. Now, the U.S. empire will never do it, but it would benefit Europe to do it. So there'll be a little bit of a battle there. But that you're going to see some things like that those discussions start to materialize. NATO's going to weaken. They want to expand to Asia, but after this debacle, it's going to be even harder for them to expand anywhere because they're not going to have the support of the people, and some of these governments are going to walk on them and their allies. Look, when this thing, think about this. The Ukraine conflict is inextricably tied to the conflict in Taiwan because they're the exact same conflict. They're the exact same conflict, the exact same tactics and strategy for the exact same reason. So when this debacle goes to pieces in Ukraine, and the people of Taiwan see that the U.S. just dragged Ukraine into a war, had it torn to mincemeat, and then abandoned it and left it there to its own, to whatever, the people of Taiwan are going to understand they're next. And I know the guy, the former Philippine prime minister, president, whatever his last name was Duterte, was recently talking, and he said, if the U.S. and China go to war, the Philippines will be a graveyard. So what was he saying? He was saying, look, if they go to war, the U.S. has bases in the Philippines, will be Ukraine. We don't want to be Ukraine. We'll be Ukraine. So that conversation is already starting in some of the peripheral countries that the U.S. is trying to, the U.S. NATO is trying to use for a similar action against China and in intimidation against China. So that's the other thing. The other countries around the world are going to look, and you think the Middle Eastern countries are abandoning the U.S. now for China. At that point, everybody's going to be getting off. They're going to be getting off the wagon. Everywhere they're going to be getting off the U.S. wagon. And I don't know how they hold NATO together. I think what they do is they hold the narrative of NATO together. I mean, if you've got like Lithuania, everybody else has dropped out of NATO but Lithuania, and NATO becomes the U.S. and Lithuania, then you just make the headquarters of NATO in Lithuania, and you just put it on, anybody who goes on social media who says, hey, the only country you got is Lithuania, you censor them and throw them off social media. There you go. That'll fix it. All you do is you don't allow people to tweet things like, hey, why is it that the only country in NATO now, the only two countries are the U.S. and Lithuania? Nah, you censor them, throw them off. That's all you do to fix it. You control the narrative. You get some NAFO trolls to attack anybody that points out that there's only two countries left in NATO. That's all they're going to have left at some point is the narrative. The narrative of NATO won't die. You know what NATO will be? It'll be like one of these companies that doesn't make anything anymore. These companies that are like in malls and they don't really exist and they don't make anything anymore, but people buy their stock and their stock trades at these exorbitant numbers. But the country really is the company is just a hollow shell that doesn't exist. But you can buy the stock and make a fortune. It's going up, it's down, it's doing all kinds of things. That's going to be NATO. They're going to have like a website. They'll have a building in Lithuania, and they'll have, a staff and things like that. Email addresses at NATO, that kind of crap. But people are going to jump ship. NATO's done. I don't see how NATO survives this. Are there any people who have done super chats? I'm sure there are. And if there are, I'm going to, I see color. Okay. 9 signs. NATO is a capitalist transfer mechanism between EU, UK taxpayers onto primary US, UK banks and corporation. It grows for profit only, not security. 100%. Easier to fool someone than to convince them they were fooled, especially in the US. 100%. See, my super chat people are on top of it. Thank you very much. Delete one. And I'm sorry I didn't say the last person's name. I'm going to go back. There we go. That was Basil Peterson. Easier to fool someone than to convince someone they were fooled. Let's keep going. We got that one. Richard Adams for the microphone fund. Oh, thanks a lot there. Microphone fund. There used to be way back in the day, there was a song called Microphone Fiend. Eric Suarez. Zelensky looks like Biden when Obama is around. Yeah, that's right. If Obama comes to the White House, everybody wants to see. It's Goodfellas. Yes, Joe Pesci time. Camilla V says it's Joe Pesci time. It's Goodfellas time for Zelensky. Gee, you understand Putin pretty well. Explain to us what's going on between him and Erdogan. Why are they still friends? I would never talk to him. I'm glad you asked me that, and I'll be happy to answer. Have you ever heard this term, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interest? He knows who Erdogan is, but he understands sometimes Erdogan is a benefit to me. And when I need a deal, sometimes I get a deal. Who would you rather deal with if you were Putin? Erdogan or Schultz? Erdogan is strong. He's not weak. Erdogan will not be Erdogan is going to look out for Erdogan. You know that anything you give Erdogan is a bargaining tool and leverage for him, and he'll use it. You know, if you make a deal with Erdogan, that Erdogan it may keep it. He's just as likely to keep his promises as not. You know that when you're going in. Putin's not stupid. He understands who he's dealing with. So when he deals with Erdogan, he gets whatever he can get out of it. He gets Erdogan's word. I don't believe for 1 second Putin and company believe that Erdogan's going to keep his word when he makes it, but they do the best they can. And sometimes Turkey can be very, very beneficial. And when he is, that's great. When he's not, so be it. That you take what you can get out of an Erdogan, and then when every now and then he's going to stab you in the back, you know it. You give him a hard time, but a couple years, weeks from now, if you need him, a couple months from now, if you need a deal and he gives you the right deal, you take that deal. You take what you can get out of him when you can get it. That's what's happening with Erdogan. Number one. Number two. The funny thing is, he made this big deal with the U.S. in order to get with the neocons, in order to get that had to do with like getting into the EU and F-16s and all this kind of stuff in order to and he let the EU into Sweden. I mean, he let Sweden into NATO. So he got all kinds of things, right? Let me ask you this. He made you're talking about you can't trust Erdogan, and we'll talk about you can't trust Erdogan. He made a deal with like Newland and Sullivan and those people. What do you think the odds are they're going to keep their deal with him? You know what I mean? Oh, what? Erdogan got a deal with the neocons. Woo! Yeah, they're going to keep that one all right. There is no chance that the deal that he has made, there's just as little chance. If you make a deal with Erdogan, you may get 50% of it. Bet on about 50% of it. The other 50%, he's going to screw you. And he just made a deal with the neocons. He ain't getting 50%. He'll get 20% of what they promised. The rest, he gets nothing. They ain't keeping their deals with him. They're just as I was going to say they're just as treacherous as he is. They're far more treacherous. So no, Erdogan is no prize. You take out out of him what you can get. But he made a deal with the neocons. Let's see how that works out for him. Vincent says, "You're an amazing man. Thank you for your content." Oh, thanks a lot there, Vincent. Certainly appreciate it. How about Chicka Boom Boom says NATO is North Alliance terrorist organization. Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks a lot, Ralphie. Oh, Chicka Boom. Thanks a lot, Chicka Boom. We got anything else to say? Oh. Sparky says, make Ukraine Russia again. Sparky. Valley S says, love you, Garland, just because. Keep up the fabulous work. Hooray, Valley S. Love you too. That's awesome. All right. Rockfin. Do we got anybody? Let's see. JVB says, I hate to see someone ridiculed like this, except in this case, Zelensky deserves it. Oh yeah, let's look at his. Let's take another look before we go at Zelensky to see what he's looking like. Let's take a look. You guys, you got to look at this. Oh, this person says, hey Garland, you didn't thank me for the Java I bought you on my budget, $190. Oh, thank Lucia. Thank you very much, Lucia. I really certainly appreciate that. That's the best $1.99 that I've ever had in my life. I'm going to enjoy that. I'm going to take that $2. It's critical and important to me, and I'm drinking coffee with it. How's that? Yay. Let's take another look at our boy before we leave. If we can figure out what his future looks like from this. What do you think? Huh? Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. And look, you got people that are engaged in a conversation here. You got them, they're doing the, oh, so nice to meet you. And she's talking to the little nobody here, right? Macron, he's talking to somebody about something. These guys are grinning, skinning and grinning over here. More skinning and grinning going on, right? That's all that. They look just lost. God only knows. I think these people are smooching. They look like they're smooching. I don't know what the hell's going on here. I'll tell you that right now. Something looks a little suspicious there. But whatever you do, look at that. The guy right next to the right behind where the two women are, the woman with the short hair, look above her head. This guy looks like he's smooching somebody. I don't know what's going on here, and I don't think I want to know. But we look at the guy in the fatigues. Look at the bottom of his pants. His pants are too long. Look at how his pants sit on his shoes. His pants are about 3 inches too long. He's got long pants and short legs. His boots don't even really, he doesn't even have the kind you can shine. Look at his clothes are wrinkled. Man, that guy don't look good. And look, everybody else is smiling. You see that? Smile, smile, friendly concern, uh, vacant, bland stare, smile, and look at this guy. Look at that worry on his head face. Look at the concern. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Oh man, am I going to get killed? Oh man, can you imagine? He doesn't know when he gets home if the Russians are going to blow him to smithereens. He doesn't know if the CIA is going to take him out for knowing too much, and the Biden team ain't going to pump a couple rounds in him. Then again, you got the Azov Nazis, and let's face it, he's Jewish. They wouldn't feel bad about doing him a bad turn. So, if the Azov Nazis feel as though that he's ideologically not aligned with them, he's a dead man. So he's looking at this guy. I think he's in depression. I really think he's depressed. That's the outfit of a man who is not sleeping much. I think he's got on his pajamas, come to think of it. That's what it is. He's got on green fatigue pajamas. They're wrinkled. He slept in them. Well, no, let me put it this. He laid in the bed on them. This guy ain't getting a whole lot of sleep these days because he always knows every night when he goes to bed that a couple rooms over, there's some Azov Nazis. And every one of them, every time he walks by, they're winking at him because they would just love to sneak in there in the middle of the night to hold a pillow over his stinking head and to put their handgun right to his stinking forehead, right through the pillow, plunk. That's what they would love to do. They probably practice. They probably are like, let's practice killing Zelensky. And they go get their pillows and they empty their guns, but they feel it click. And they all look at each other because they know one day they're going to get their chance. They know one day they're going to get the okay. The CIA is going to call and say, how's Zelensky doing? And they're going to say, well, he's doing fine. He looks okay to me. And the CIA is going to say, yeah, that's unfortunate. Be a shame if something happened to him. If the quote, wink, wink, if the Russians took him out. And the Azov Nazis will say, yeah, we got it. And they'll look at each other because they will know it's time to do what they've been practicing. It's time to do what they've been preparing for, what they've been shining their handgun up for, what they've been fluffing that pillow for. And two of them will go in because two of them will have to hold his arms down because he's going to know what's coming. He ain't going to be asleep. And when the door cracks open, he's going to know, oh my God, this is it. And the first guy's going to walk in and he's going to just, Zelensky will ask him, hey, is this it? And the guy's just going to look the other way. And he'll know because that's how they do it in the mafia. And the one guy will hold his hands down and he'll squirm for a while. The other guy will put a pillow over his stinking head. That's what's coming. That's, see you later, guys. Adios, AMF. Adios, mofo. That's what's happening to Zelensky. And that picture is a man who knows it won't be long. Who knows that he's going to meet his good and fluffy maker in maybe days, could be hours, could be months. But he ain't going to have to worry about living to a jolly old life. He knows too much. He knows too much. He could talk. He could say, Biden told me this. He could go before the IC, International Criminal Court of Justice, couldn't he? He could be bought out by the Russians and go to Moscow and say, I decided to tell you everything if you'll just let me live. Can I live next to Snowden? And the Russians will probably say, sure, we'll take care of you. Not a problem. What do you know? Well, let me tell you about Biden, Newland, this, that. Let me tell you where the bodies are buried. Let me tell you what the CIA did. Let me tell you everything. Not that he's going to do that. But unfortunately for him, he could because he knows enough to do that. And when you could, because you know enough to do that, think about Epstein. Epstein knew too much. They put him in prison. They tried their best to stop him from committing suicide, but unfortunately for them, they were unable to prevent Epstein from doing the unthinkable. That somehow a lot of coincidences occurred at the same time. The guards fell asleep, the cameras turned off, they forgot to do their rounds. A lot of things serendipitously happened, and unfortunately for old Jeffrey Epstein, he was in a very unfortunate state of mind. And poor old, if you look at it, I'm thinking Zelensky, he really looks kind of worried, like he could be thinking to himself to be or not to be. That is the question. the question is going to be, the answer is going to be not to be, and it might not be his or at his own hand. All right, thanks a lot, you all. Sparky says Zelensky's mother wasn't Jewish and he never converted, so he's a Jew of convenience at best. Yeah. All right, let's see. Did I miss anything? Nope. I think we got it all. And I think Zelensky's goose is cooked. What do you think? You think his goose is cooked? I think so. All right. Well, my goose is going to be cooked if I don't get in the sack soon because I got a lot to do. So thanks. And I got to get up and get going tomorrow. All right. And oh gosh, I'm so sore today from working out yesterday. I worked out too hard yesterday. I am not a young man. I really went for it yesterday. And I'm walking around today like I'm 100 years old. And I'm only 99. So that doesn't make sense. Thanks a lot, you guys. Peace. I'm out. And see you later, Valley S. Valley S says, have a fabulous evening, rest of your week. Thanks. You too, Valley S. Talk to you all soon.